Michael had practical reasons to worry about his public image because of the incident in which his mother confronted Gina Sprague. Around the same time that Catherine, Janet, and Randy were criticized for allegedly attacking Joe's secretary, the Jacksons released their album Triumph. Perhaps to satisfy his brothers, Michael did not abandon the group to pursue only his solo career. Instead, he devoted even more effort to Triumph. In the lively music video for one of the album's songs, Can You Feel It?, the Jackson brothers glided across the earth like benevolent gods, showering the jubilant crowds below with light, color, peace, love, and happiness. To create several magical visual effects for the album's promotional film, Michael and his brothers hired the renowned illusionist Doug Henning to design spectacular scenes. Hoping to make the production rival Steven Spielberg's science fiction film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the performance featured fireworks, elaborate lighting effects, and Michael disappearing into a cloud of thick smoke during the climax of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. There was yet another special effect. Michael had turned to plastic surgeon Stephen Hufflin. Allegedly because his first rhinoplasty had left him with breathing difficulties, Michael underwent a second nose surgery. His nose was made narrower and the bridge raised through the procedure, making it appear too small for the proportions of his face. Yet everyone was so busy with the increasingly successful tour that one member of the management team remarked in amazement, "It seems no one even noticed, not even Catherine." Michael reluctantly continued touring with his brothers, though he told those closest to him that it would probably be the last time. Whenever they were not on stage, he tried to keep his distance from them. He often slipped away with Bill Bray, disguised himself, and wandered the streets for hours. Sometimes he browsed through toy stores. Other times he found himself among homeless people and runaway children. Michael avoided alcohol, cocaine, and hard drugs, but he could not completely avoid prescription medications containing narcotics. At least one acquaintance, June Scott, claimed that during a concert in Ohio, she saw him backstage taking red pills, amphetamine stimulants. She said, Michael often had to take those red pills to stay awake. Of course, he became dependent on them. When you see the pressure he was under, how can you really blame him? Whatever the reason, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic. During a visit to Atlanta, he dressed in mismatched clothes, wore dark sunglasses, and topped it all off with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. Accompanied by a bodyguard, he spent hours driving aimlessly around the city. After more than 2 hours of wandering with no destination, Michael grew increasingly restless and suddenly ordered the car to stop. He got out, walked into an antique shop just as its English owner, John Nolan, was closing for the day, brushed right past him, went to the back of the store, stepped into a glass-enclosed room, and shut the door behind him. A short while later, Michael emerged and ordered Nolan to take him downstairs to see the basement showroom. Nolan later recalled, "He behaved very strangely. It was like talking to a little child." When Nolan refused, and instead told him he was going to call the police, Michael blocked his path and thrust a hand into his jacket pocket in a threatening gesture. Not recognizing Michael, Nolan thought he was reaching for a knife. He later said, "Oh my God, I thought someone was going to die." Believing that either he or Michael would be killed, the shop owner threw a punch that knocked Michael to the floor. As Michael struggled to get back up, Nolan grabbed him and dragged him toward the front door, smashing Michael's head against the glass. Shards rained down over both of them. Remarkably, neither suffered serious cuts. As Michael lay unconscious on the floor, Nolan called the police. Only then did Michael's bodyguard rush into the shop. Nolan told him the Atlanta police were on their way. The bodyguard replied, "I don't know why I didn't just knock his head off." The police arrived, and as they escorted Michael away, witnesses said the bodyguard turned toward Nolan and shouted, "You English bastard, I'll kill you." At the time, a serial killer had murdered 10 black children in Atlanta, and the entire city was living in near panic. 2 hours after the confrontation, a city official telephoned Nolan and warned him that if he insisted on pressing charges against the man who had broken into his store, his business could become the target of race-related retaliation. Still unaware of the intruder's identity, Nolan ignored the official's warning. It was not until someone later took him to a record store downtown, where he saw Michael's face displayed in the window, that he realized who had been in his shop. When Nolan learned that Michael had
statement
generously
from the
donated
Jacksons?
$5
What
million
about the antique shop?
to a fund for the families of
Just a
murdered
comment,
children,
please?
he decided
The
to let the
public
matter drop.
deserves answers.
Although the police initially acknowledged
What do you
that
think
an
you're doing with
incident
that?
had occurred,
Put that back.
Atlanta
I saw you
Assistant
steal it,
Police
you
Chief
thief.
William
You
Taylor
people are all the
later
same,
stated
always
that Michael
stealing.
had never been arrested,
No, I didn't steal anything.
that there had
Please
been no
stop.
attempt to hush up the case, and that Nolan had voluntarily
back
chosen
off now.
not to press
Stop
charges
it.
as long as Michael did not file
family
assault
claims.
charges against him.
Lawsuit
However,
was filed and
the detective
dropped after a
assigned to
death
the
threat.
case, Jeff Green, insisted that Michael had in fact been arrested. According to reports, Green himself revealed that the arrest records
Michael,
had been
it's her
destroyed
again.
to conceal
Hundreds
the
of
truth.
letters, all paternity
Green
claims.
said,
She's a teenager.
"I don't know what
getting
happened
out
to
of
those
hand.
records.
This is the
I only know
admirer's
they
photo.
aren't
She
there
appears at
anymore,
Hyveness
and they
Call
shouldn't
Police
have
immediately.
disappeared."
Understood.
Someone
I'll
made
distribute
sure
this.
Jackson stayed out of jail. The Jackson family did not respond publicly to that incident. Curiously, however, they did recount another episode involving Michael that they believed occurred around the same time. Michael was quietly browsing through a convenience food store when a white racist accused him of stealing a candy bar. The man screamed,
This fear
"You black
has
bastard,"
to end.
in Michael's face,
I'll
and
frame
beat
this
him
memory
savagely until Michael's
and put this away
bodyguard, Bill
securely.
Bray, rushed in to rescue him. The family
Early in
announced that they
1982,
intended
the
to
flow
file
of
a
letters
lawsuit,
stopped.
but
A
later
final
dropped the
empty mail
case
tray
after
replaced
learning
the
that the
previous
racist had
piles.
threatened Michael's
The young
life.
woman was diagnosed
Even
and
so,
admitted to psychiatric
Michael
care.
remained a prime
Can
target
you
for
feel
overzealous
it?
fans. He constantly received unsolicited
Live in concert!
photographs and marriage proposals from young women.
We're
The volume
shining
became
down
so
on you.
overwhelming that by 1981,
Thank you,
every
we love
such
you.
letter was destroyed as soon as it was opened. No admirer was more
This tour is
obsessed
crucial
than the
for
young
us
woman who
financially. We
bombarded
have to make
Michael
it
with
work.
hundreds of
But the
letters throughout
expenses are huge. We're spreading it all
1981.
evenly.
Although she was not
We
the
have
first
to.
woman
The
to
family
imagine that
needs
Michael
it.
had fathered her
I don't
child,
care about the money.
the increasingly
Michael, this
disturbed
affects all
tone
of
of her
us.
letters
He's
genuinely
right.
frightened
We need to
him.
be smart.
Fearing that she might
Michael,
appear
will
at
you lead the group
Havenhurst,
for a solo
Michael's
career?
staff distributed
Oh,
her
I don't
photograph
know.
to the security guards
Honestly, I can't answer
and
that
instructed
right
them
now.
to call the
At
police
this point, it's
immediately if she
impossible
was
to say
seen.
for sure.
Her
Whatever is
obsession
meant to
reached
happen
its
will
peak
happen.
when a package
But are you
arrived containing a
considering it?
photograph of
I
her
can't
with a
say.
child, a letter,
This can't
and a
work
handgun.
forever.
In the letter, the woman, who
Keeping
claimed
Joe
to be
in charge
Michael's
is not
lover,
sustainable.
wrote that she owned a gun just like the one she had mailed
After that
him,
meeting, I
and that
know.
at exactly 12 noon on the coming Sunday, she would use it to kill both herself and her child.
John, it's time.
She
I'm
desperately
handing you
begged
Michael's
Michael to
account.
take the gun
I'm
from
honored,
the package
David. I
and,
won't let you down.
at that
I
very
know.
same
Here
hour,
are the files.
use it to
Thank
end his
you.
own life as
I'll
well.
review everything.
The incident
Good.
deeply
He's
disturbed
talented,
Michael,
and you'll do great.
yet he did not have
I'm
the
ready.
strength to
Thank you for this
respond
opportunity.
decisively.
Good luck, John.
Strangely enough, the young woman's
These
prolonged
clauses are
obsession
restrictive.
eventually
Michael deserves
became
better.
almost routine to him. He framed her
Recalculating the
photograph
royalties, this
and
escalator
hung it on
changes
the wall,
everything.
placing the handgun among
With this
the other
structure,
unusual
Michael becomes the
keepsakes
highest
he had
paid
collected.
performers, period.
Fortunately, she never threatened him again. Her letters stopped
Michael, I've
arriving in
reviewed
early
everything.
1982
This is the best strategy.
after she was
I
diagnosed
see.
with multiple
What are the next
personality
steps?
disorder
We
and
proceed
admitted
with
to
the
a
filings.
psychiatric
I'll handle the
hospital.
details.
Both the Triumph
And the
album
timing?
and its accompanying tour
We can start next
exceeded
week.
all expectations.
Good. I
At a
trust
time
you.
when many leading R&B
Michael, I'm back.
groups,
We can
especially
resume our
Earth,
work.
Wind, and
David,
Fire,
things have
were
changed.
setting the
I've
standard that
committed to
others
John.
struggled to match.
What?
The Jacksons
After all our
achieved a
discussions?
spectacular success of
Yes.
their own.
It's done.
The tour
The
earned
agreement is
$5 million.
finalized. I see.
Michael could
I
easily
wish you
have
had told
ignored
me.
the money, but for his
Move!
brothers,
Get out of my
whose
way!
extravagant spending
I want
continued,
those reports on
it
my
was vital.
desk now.
Even so,
No excuses.
nothing
We're
Michael
not playing
accomplished with
games
the
here.
Jacksons could rival the
You,
acclaim he
get
had
me the
earned
damn
with Off the Wall.
contracts. Don't just
Rumors that he
stand
would
there.
eventually
Move.
leave the group to concentrate on his solo career
Gentlemen,
became
let's be
impossible to
clear.
ignore.
This
When he was
division
asked
is
whether he
mine.
planned to strike
No
out
one
on his
loves
own,
anyone but
Michael
me.
replied, "Maybe yes, maybe no. Honestly, I can't answer that."
Gentlemen, our Q4
Right now, it's
projections are
impossible
solid.
to
Let's
say
review
for
our star
sure.
performers. Look
Whatever
at
is
these
meant
sales
to
charts. Our
happen
major
will happen.
CBS stars are crushing it. Now
Michael's
for Michael,
long-term
we need to turn him into
strategy
our biggest
depended on the
superstar,
new
period.
management team he
Here's
had
the
recently
strategy.
assembled. It did not take long for him to find
is the
someone to
Black Rock
replace his
building.
father. Along with Diana
I've played
Ross,
the odds
Neil
my whole
Diamond,
life,
Bob Dylan, and George
and I
Harrison,
always win.
Michael had been a client of David
Get those
Braun,
radio
a
lists out
prominent
now.
music business
On it,
attorney,
shipping the promos.
ever since signing
Move
with
it.
Epic.
Boxes to the truck.
When Braun left
Yes,
his
sir.
thriving
Loading 'em
practice
up.
to become
Philly
president
added,
of
LA
Polygram
next.
Records in October
Mr.
1980,
DeLeo, what are the
he
allegations?
entrusted
These are
Michael
just
to one of his
allegations,
young,
not convictions.
energetic
In
associates,
1977,
a
DeLeo was
30-year-old
charged with
lawyer with a
conspiracy and
background in
illegal
tax
gambling.
law
I will
named
fight
John
these charges
Branca.
in court.
Branca was
DeLeo's network is
intelligent
expanding.
and
We need every
ambitious,
promoter on board.
determined to
Cash,
help
drugs,
Michael
favors,
fulfill
tools
his
of the
dream
trade,
of becoming the
priority shipment,
wealthiest
insure airplane,
entertainer in the
handshake,
world.
seal Seal deals.
Michael and
Intimidation is
Branca
applied. The
quickly
list is
developed a
ready.
close and
Organized
genuine
crime?
friendship.
That's all
Michael
over.
believed the young attorney
Ever since Al
understood him
Capone died,
and
there
could
hasn't been any
accomplish what his
organized
father
crime.
never could. He trusted Branca so completely that when Braun
After
returned
Off
to
the Wall,
private
what's
practice
next?
6
He
months
has to
later
top it.
and intended
The
to
buzz is
announce that
building.
Michael
What's
had
next?
once again become his client,
This is
Jackson
our
had
moment.
already
We
committed
must deliver.
himself to
The numbers
Branca.
look great. The hype is real.
Branca's principal ally at Epic was none other than Walter Yetnikoff, the brilliant and notoriously combative president of CBS Records. In sharp contrast to the calm and diplomatic Branca, Yetnikoff, who had grown up in Brooklyn, was famously hot-tempered. Rising from an insecure young lawyer, Yetnikoff had become one of the most
Michael is a
powerful
poet who
figures
has
in the
built his
music
own
record
imaginative
business,
world.
largely by
He seems like a
intimidating the
child
people
trapped
around
in an
him.
adult body.
In short,
A childlike
his ego
quality?
was so enormous
Exactly, it's his
that,
greatest
in his
strength.
own mind,
Quincy,
no
for the
one
ET
measured up
album,
to him.
Michael's voice is perfect.
Yetnikoff's
You're
favorite
right.
saying
He's
was,
got the magic.
"No one
exactly.
is greater than I
He'll
am."
bring the story to life.
Only 2
Let's
years
do it.
earlier,
Michael's
Yetnikoff had little confidence in the
If
Jacksons.
E.T. didn't come
even
to
Michael.
Elliot, he'd
He had been
probably come to
informed
your
of the
house
strained
instead.
relationship between
Really?
the group
That would
and
be amazing.
CBS.
I
But
can
now,
see it.
while
Wow.
working with an extraordinary roster of
Hello
artists
there.
that included
I'm
Barbara
Michael.
Streisand,
Hello,
Bob
Michael.
Dylan, Cyndi
You're amazing.
Lauper, and
Let's be
Meatloaf,
friends.
Yetnikoff set out to
I have to
create
go now, but I'll
opportunities
miss
for
you.
Michael.
I'll miss you too.
He recognized
It
that
was
with the right
wonderful.
support and promotion,
He held my hand.
Michael could become
He hugged me.
CBS's biggest superstar.
He was so real that I talked
the man
to him.
credited with building Michael's own
Before I left, I
mafia
even kissed him.
was Frank DeLeo,
I feel as if
the
I
head
am
of promotion
truly
at CBS
inside the
Records.
story.
Standing 5
Standing behind
feet
a
2 inches
tree
tall and
and
weighing
watching
well over
everything
250 pounds, DeLeo was jokingly nicknamed the
E.T.,
Human
no, don't
Cannonball.
go.
He was a prominent
Quincy,
figure
look
among
at
the
him.
Brooks Brothers crowd,
He's feeling every
the
moment.
power
Let's keep
brokers
this
who
take.
operated from
Agreed.
the
It's
35th
perfect.
floor of BlackRock.
Please stay.
With his
Michael, for this
bulldog-like
superhero
jowls,
role, you need to find the one that
Churchill-style
fits you.
cigar,
I agree,
and
Stephen.
pinky
What are you
ring
thinking?
set with a
Something with
sparkling
heart, a
gemstone,
hero who connects
he
with
looked more
people.
like a professional
I like that.
gambler
I'll look
than
for
the
the right fit.
executive of a major
I know
record
exactly
company.
who you should play.
In fact,
Peter
for a
Pan.
time,
Peter
he had
Pan?
been
Really?
exactly that.
Yes, you're perfect.
During
The
college
spirit, the
basketball
energy.
games in
I love it.
1977
Peter Pan.
and
It's
again in
yours.
1978,
Why would
DeLeo
you
was
say that?
indicted and brought to trial
Because
on
you are
gambling-related
Peter Pan.
charges.
Peter
During his
Pan?
5 years as head of
Yes.
promotion,
You never have to
DeLeo
grow
played a
up.
crucial role in transforming
Every wall
unknown
in my room
performers
is-
such as
covered
Meatloaf,
with Peter
Cyndi
Pan
Lauper,
pictures
and
and
Boy George into
I feel
major
like the
stars.
lost boy of Neverland.
His colleagues considered him the company's most self-assured executive
we have to
when
get
it came
Michael
to
for Peter
cultivating
Pan. He's the lost
relationships with
boy.
independent
Go on, Jay.
promoters.
A large-scale Neverland.
A
What are his
lucrative
thoughts?
Every wall
network
in my
that
room is
often
covered with
depended
Peter
on
Pan pictures, and he
bribes,
feels like the lost
paid
boy of
either in
Neverland.
cash
Can
or
he lead the Lost
drugs,
Boys?
favors,
While
and
Michael Jackson
intimidation.
was seriously considered
DeLeo
and
once
passionate about the
remarked,
lead, the role of
"Organized
the adult
crime?
Peter Pan went
That's
to Robin
nonsense.
Williams in director
Ever
Steven
since Al
Spielberg's
Capone died, there
1991
hasn't
film
been any
Hook.
organized crime."
Finally in
DeLeo made
London,
an
the
enormous
E.T. storybook
contribution
is
to
almost
Michael
ready.
Jackson's career.
I can't wait to finish
Even so,
recording the narration.
the executives at Epic,
This is
along with
going to be
millions of fans
magical.
around the world, were anxiously waiting to see what Michael would do after Off
But
the
don't
Wall.
play games with my
Before he could
affection.
take that next step, however,
take what you
Michael had a
need,
promise to
but
keep
don't
to a
leave
new
me with
friend.
no direction.
That friend was
Paul,
only
this is
about 3
sounding
feet
great.
tall,
Thanks,
had a
Michael.
glowing
How's this line?
fingertip,
Maybe
and
my
preferred to be
lonely heart
called by
there?
his initials,
Perfect. Let's mark that.
E.T.
Great.
The first time Michael watched Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extraterrestrial, he became completely absorbed in the story. The second time, he burst into tears. At the time, Spielberg believed no one was better suited to narrate the E.T. story album for MCA than Michael. He told writer Jerry Hershey, "Michael is the oldest surviving child I've ever met. He has complete control over his own world. I've never met anyone quite like him. He's an extraordinarily sensitive child." Spielberg hired Quincy Jones to produce the soundtrack album, a 33 and 1/3 revolutions per minute LP, and both men immediately thought of Michael. Spielberg told him, "If E.T. hadn't come to Elliot, he would have come to your house." Michael agreed to record the album, but first he wanted to meet the little actor. A photo session was arranged. "He was wonderful," Michael recalled with complete sincerity. "He sat on my lap. He hugged me. He was so real that I found myself talking to him. Before I left, I kissed him." During the E.T. recording sessions, Michael could barely contain his emotions. He said, "I felt as if I were really there, standing behind a tree or hiding somewhere, watching everything happen." When the story reached the scene in which E.T. dies, Michael became overwhelmed again, and genuine tears streamed down his face. Spielberg and Jones decided to leave that emotional moment in the recording. By then, Spielberg was encouraging Michael to pursue acting, urging him to find the right role. Jane Fonda thought she had already found it. One afternoon, as the two of them rode together in Michael's new white Rolls-Royce, she wondered aloud what film could possibly suit him. Then the answer suddenly came to her. "I know what role you should play. Peter Pan." Michael burst into tears. "Why would you say that?" "Because," she replied, "you are Peter Pan."
Diana,
"You
your
know,"
mother,
Michael
first
said
love,
after
and
regaining his
sister, all
composure,
combined.
"my room is covered with pictures of
note I
Peter
write,
Pan.
I feel
I'm
your
exactly
influence.
like Peter Pan,
Thank you,
the
Diana.
little boy lost in Neverland." Francis Ford Coppola was then planning a lavish new adaptation of Peter Pan, and Jane Fonda called him to persuade him to cast Michael in the title role. She said with
This would be
heartfelt
perfect for
conviction,
Diana.
"I can just
I didn't
picture
have a
him
tape
leading a group
recorder,
of children
so I
into
had
a
to keep
magical
the melody
fantasy
alive in
world."
my head for the entire
Later,
3-hour
Steven
flight.
Spielberg developed
The
his
moment
own
I got
Peter
home,
Pan
I
project
recorded
with
it.
Michael originally intended for the lead role. The film eventually became the 1991 movie Hook, starring Robin Williams in the role that had initially been envisioned for Jackson. Meanwhile, Michael was busy with many other projects. While still recording the E.T. storybook, he flew to London to work with Paul McCartney at Abbey Road Studios on Say, Say, Say. The single became one of the biggest-selling records of 1983. In return, McCartney traveled to Los Angeles to record one of Michael's songs, "The Girl Is
Song is
Mine,"
about my beloved
for Michael's
Python.
upcoming album.
She's beautiful.
During
You're
Michael's stay at
handling her very
McCartney's
well.
enormous estate
She's my
outside London,
inspiration. I wanted
one of the
people to
former
understand
Beatles
her.
proudly told him that he owned the
clear you
publishing
two have a
rights to a
special
vast
bond.
catalog of songs,
not misunderstood
ranging
to
from
me.
classics such as Stormy Weather
Diana, let's get
to famous
Pythons
hits
back
from the
on track.
1950s
Yes,
like
I'm ready.
Autumn Leaves,
Pythons are
and
misunderstood.
legendary rock and roll songs
Spinning
such
it
as
now.
Peggy Sue
getting
and
airplay.
Every Day. Having already learned a great deal about the music business, Michael was astonished to learn that the owner of a song's publishing rights was paid every time that song was performed live, broadcast on television, or played on the radio. He was even more amazed to discover that the catalog McCartney owned earned him more than $38 million a year. It suddenly became clear why, in 1982, McCartney was considered the wealthiest performer in the entertainment world. The entire business of music publishing was a revelation to Michael. In the end, McCartney would probably come to regret the day he casually shared those secrets with his younger friend. When Michael returned from London, his mind was overflowing with difficult questions. Diana Ross, the woman who had been like a mother, a lover, and a sister to him, had now left Motown. She was recording her second album for RCA, Silk Electric, and it had to be a major success. As Michael flew home aboard the Concorde, a melody suddenly formed in his head. He later recalled, "I said, this is perfect for Diana. I didn't have a tape recorder or anything with me, so I had to keep it in my head for 3 hours. The moment I got home, I recorded it." That musical creation became the song Muscles, a sensual tribute to the beauty of the male physique. The song left many people, including Ross herself, wondering what had inspired Michael to write it. Michael insisted it was about the pet snake he adored at home. Yet lyrics such as, "I want to feel your muscles against my body," suggested that something rather different had been on the songwriter's mind. That was no obstacle. Thanks to the support she had received throughout her career, Ross was able to succeed once again. Henry Fonda was gravely ill when he finally won his first Academy
Catherine Fears Joe
Award
was using
for On
family
Golden
assets to
Pond,
support a mistress
so
and
ill
child.
that he was unable to
Mentions
attend the
claimed spending on
ceremony.
furniture.
Instead, Jane accepted the Oscar on his behalf and later brought the statuette to his home in Bel Air, placing it in his hands. The Fonda family, Jane, her brother Peter, and Henry's fifth wife, Shirley, could only marvel that it had taken him so long to receive the recognition he deserved. What made it even more poignant was that Henry Fonda lived only 5 more months. Around the time of his death, on August 12, 1982, the family was spending quiet, peaceful days together. That evening, Michael drove to Henry's Bel Air estate in his new black Rolls-Royce. He sat with Jane, Peter, and Shirley as they reminisced, laughed, cried, and watched television reports covering tributes to the legendary actor. Whether entirely accurate or not, there were unmistakable signs that a deep friendship had developed very quickly between Jane Fonda and Michael. Both had grown up in families where emotionally distant, domineering fathers had left lasting wounds. Just as Jane struggled with Henry, Michael struggled with Joe. They recognized those deep emotional scars in one another and found comfort in their shared experiences. A week after Henry Fonda's death, Michael Jackson's attention shifted to turmoil within his own family. Katherine Jackson filed for divorce for the second time because of the continuing conflicts that could no longer be reconciled. She also requested custody of Janet, her youngest daughter, who was still only 16 years old. The divorce filing listed the couple's valuable assets: the family home at Havenhurst, a condominium in the San Fernando Valley, a a business known as Joe Jackson Productions, furniture and other personal property, numerous stock holdings, a 1974 GMC automobile, a white 1971 Rolls-Royce, a green 1971 Rolls-Royce, a blue-gray Mercedes-Benz, a brown 1978 Mercedes-Benz 380 SEL, a 1981 Toyota pickup truck, a white 1980 Cadillac, 2 boats, a trailer, and a Keogh retirement plan. In the years since she had first considered divorcing Joe, Catherine had come to realize how little she actually knew about the family's financial affairs. She feared that if she waited until the court ordered Joe to stop spending money, there might be nothing left. In her court testimony, Catherine recalled that about a year earlier, Joe had told her they were running out of money. When she asked why, he snapped, "Stay out of my business." From time to time after that, she continued, he would keep talking about losing money. I often asked whether he wanted me to help in the business office, but he always told me to stay home. Joe handled all the money himself and only gave me money whenever I needed it. Catherine also feared that Joe was using family assets to support his mistress and her child. In her sworn statement, she declared, "I have been told, and I believe, that during the past year he spent as much as $50,000 on the woman and had bought her furniture with family money." Catherine soon discovered that the family's financial troubles ran deeper than she had imagined. Much of the difficulty stemmed from losses at Joe's small record company and from several questionable investments he had made. To raise cash, Joe was forced to sell half of the Havenhurst estate to Michael for $500,000. Rather than waiting for the family home to deteriorate, Michael decided to transform it. Over the course of nearly 2 years, he converted the modest California ranch-style house into an 18th-century fantasy palace.
Sign this.
devoted
It
to
says you
music,
agree to buy half
art,
of Havenhurst
and
for $500,000.
literature. It featured
Why only
cascading
half?
fountains, stained glass
I need the cash.
windows,
Sign
glittering
it.
chandeliers, sweeping spiral staircases,
This house
marble
means
floors,
too much.
upholstered furniture
restore
embroidered with
it.
peacock designs, and small bronze statues scattered throughout the property. One visitor remarked, "Everything seems to have gold leaf on it." One room resembled a cave, paneled in oak, and given the rather eccentric
looks like
name,
everything's
the
been
Grotto.
dipped in gold.
It contained a soda fountain where Michael's younger siblings would mix
absolutely
drinks with
dazzling.
milk and sliced bananas for visiting guests, who watched in amused surprise.
milk's in.
Above an
Now for the
antique,
bananas.
intricately
Whoa,
carved
what are you
mahogany
making?
bar
Banana
hung an
milk, that's a
enormous
surprise.
lead-framed
It's our
stained
special
glass
recipe.
window,
Ooh,
depicting an
smells
armored
amazing.
medieval knight gazing toward a dark castle perched atop a hill. Outside, a brick pathway wound through flower beds filled with rhododendrons, purple roses, and pansies. The path led to a pond where 4 graceful black swans glided silently across the water. Havenhurst had begun as little more than a modest private zoo, but it continued to grow after the success of Muscles.
Welcome to Havenhurst,
The
a
collection
private zoo
now
dedicated
included
to
2
animal
humpless
welfare.
camels
Here are
named
Loda and Lewis,
Lewis,
2 humpless
a
camels.
goat
This is Mr.
named
Tibbs,
Mr.
our friendly
Tibbs,
goat. Meet
a
Jabbar, our
giraffe
majestic
named
giraffe,
Jabbar,
and our deer and
2
peacocks.
deer named Prince and Princess, and 2 peacocks named Winter and Spring. Inside the grounds, a scaled-down version of Disneyland's Main Street, USA had been recreated, complete with charming old-fashioned
Wow,
storefronts
look at that giraffe!
and an audio-animatronic
And the
Abraham
peacocks are
Lincoln
so
that seemed
beautiful.
almost lifelike.
I love
The
it
mechanical
here.
president became one of the greatest attractions
Morning,
for
Quincy.
visitors
Ready to make
exploring
history?
Michael's own
You bet,
magic
Michael.
kingdom.
Let's get to it.
At night,
Morning,
mysterious
gentlemen. The tapes
glowing
are inside.
orbs, which
Perfect.
Michael
Let's
proudly
go.
called his sparkle lights, danced
All
around
right,
the
Michael,
estate.
let's lay
By the
down
time
the
the
intro.
renovations
Got
were
it.
complete,
Starting to tape.
Michael had spent
Good.
$3 million
Boost the highs on that.
transforming Havenhurst.
Perfect. The groove is
Yet
locked
behind
in.
Havenhurst's magnificent facade, Michael's parents' marriage was
Quincy,
quietly
I wanna
falling
dedicate
apart.
this album
Catherine
to my
filed her
mother.
divorce petition in
She's
complete
forgiven me for
secrecy,
everything.
so discreetly that
That's
neither the
beautiful,
press
Michael.
nor
Let's do
even
it.
Epic Records knew
Thank
anything
you.
about it.
what
Michael,
about
for his
Starlight?
part, felt relieved when he
Starlight, let me
learned that his
see.
mother had finally
nice
found the
ring, but
courage
I'm
to
not
leave
sure.
Joe,
It's close.
or at least
Let's keep it
believed
on the
she
list.
intended to.
Yeah, let's
Joe,
think about
however, still had one strategy left. After months of negotiations,
Starlight.
paperwork,
It's
and legal
good, but it's missing
maneuvering,
something.
Catherine
What about
gave
the
in
melody? It
once
needs more
again.
magic.
Michael
Magic,
concealed the
yes.
anger
A new
that both
title.
he and his
I
mother
feel
felt
it.
toward
Billie
Joe.
Jean?
But for
That's
the
it.
moment,
That's the one.
he had to set those emotions aside
Thriller.
and concentrate on the work before him. In August 1982, Michael and Quincy Jones began recording a new album at Westlake Studios in Los Angeles. Michael intended to dedicate the album to his forgiving mother. At first, he thought of calling it Starlight, but before long, he and Q came up with a new title, Thriller.